It's kind of a good story, actually. When I got my job at Florida State back in 2010, I kept being told you need a pattern, you need a stream of research that's consistent, and you're in one lane and you're the expert in that space. And being a sports nutrition person at a big R1 university was a little bit intimidating because I didn't know which route I'd be able to go and if I could even maintain a career doing the things I'd want to do. And I decided to just go for it because I thought if this isn't what they want for me, I'll find that out quickly, and then it's not the right fit. So let's just go for it. So I started looking around, and at that time, Biggest Loser was kind of all over TV, and they were always saying, stop eating at certain cut points to lose weight. So it was like 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. It was these early time points. And I started looking at the literature because as a former athlete and some friends who were bodybuilders, they ate all the time and were absolutely shredded. The best, most fit individuals, men and women, were eating at night. Like they would have eggs or cottage cheese or a protein shake, or even go back to leftovers from dinner and just have it again. And it just didn't match up. So started looking. There was very little out there feeding something that was specific. I'm not talking about huge meals or people with nighttime eating syndrome or workers who work overnight, shift workers like that. There was some literature in that space, but nothing for sport or body composition or health if it was purposeful eating, particularly protein, which I was kind of always interested in at that period. And so right about the same time we started, work out of Luc Van Loon's lab began in that same space. So for almost 10 years, we were the only ones doing that kind of work, which was really cool. And he has some techniques which are amazing. So he was doing all the muscle protein synthesis, all of the kind of hardcore techniques. And we were doing a little more of the applied work, a little more of the body composition change, metabolic change, and really, I don't know, for me, outcomes that people really care about and can sink their teeth into, which got a lot of attention. So we got picked up by magazines and news outlets. And it just seems like it's a fun way to get your research out there, because other than you two who might read my article, maybe it's does it make the media? And
I read them.
Yeah, okay. I got one.
Wait, let me ask you a technical question that deals with you mentioned Luc Van Loon and some of the muscle protein synthetic stuff he did, whereas you were more interested. We call it the applied stuff, but I call it the more important stuff, because there seems to be, and I want your scientific and maybe just sort of a general opinion about the value of looking at these acute changes versus what I consider much more important. Well, does it help performance? 1, does it improve body composition? 2, and 3, is there some other metric that says this is better? Because to me, I think a lot of people get lost in the muscle protein, the acute muscle protein synthetic data. And I don't know how applicable it really is. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people who make a point that because MPS went up because of anything, that's what you need to do. And it really doesn't mean much if you're not putting muscle on over time, or you're not in a positive energy balance or whatever you're looking at. So I agree, like that stuff leads to some really cool findings. There's some wonderful researchers who use these isotopic tracers to figure these really cool details out. But if you don't do it for long enough, all you're doing is saying, it's interesting. A couple of key enzymes are changing, or maybe some proteins are being upregulated. But someone once told me that, upregulated proteins don't win gold medals.
That is true. There are no gold medals for, hey, I had the highest MPS, damn it.
Yeah. So over time, it's really important to see what happens. And so our work started in this nighttime feeding space. And again, we do a lot, but this is just kind of what we're most known for. We started in that space looking at some acute things like, can you eat before bed? What does it do to your sleep? What does it do to your resting metabolic rate? These are tools I had in the lab. So it was very simple to design some of these. And so when I had these, the availability of that, it was like, okay, I've got friends who sell these products. Let me see if we can go after getting products. And then it went to, okay, let me go bigger. Let me see if I can get grants from external organizations. And the work just kept getting picked up. And it became this stream of research where we tried different populations. We tried men, we tried women, we tried young, we tried old. And believe it or not, we're still working in this space because new questions keep coming up, even though I'm going on my 14th year at FSU, and we've been doing at least a study a year, at least on this stuff over that period of time.
Wow, that's amazing that you've kept that one avenue. And I'm sure you run into this because I run into this as well, that despite the fact that you do all this other research, people always ask you about pre-sleep protein.
That's true. Actually, I stopped speaking at several conferences for a little while because I was saying the same thing over and over. And I was like, no one's going to come anymore. I need to wait and get some more data to go back and do this again.
Well, let me ask you this. So in terms of pre-sleep feeding, let's talk about casein versus whey versus plant-based proteins, and whatever assessments you do that matter. Talk about those three proteins and how they might impact what happens the next day.
Okay. Well, we'll do like the Tarantino thing on this. It doesn't matter. So that's it. Now let's go back and figure out how that happened.
Okay. No, that's good. Hey, sometimes the punchline is more important. So
yeah, that's the punchline, but it didn't start that way. And it took a long time to figure out. We started giving people carbohydrate as the comparator or a non-nutritive placebo. And that was kind of hard to do at first because you had to decide, do I need another group? And that's a lot more expense to do these things. But we either had carbohydrate or nothing as the comparison or both. And then we usually did whey because we had access to it. And then we started adding casein because casein, is kind of known for its kinetics. It's the slow release protein everybody talks about. So it kind of made sense at night where you might want several hours, 7-8 hours of time for maybe this drip of protein, amino acids into your bloodstream. So that was the theory behind it. But I remember talking to Luke, because Luke Van Loon, we had a ACSM presentation together years ago where we highlighted all this stuff, probably around 2013, 2014. And I said, are you seeing a difference with whey or casein? Like, what are you seeing? Because I'm not seeing much of a difference. And we started hypothesizing, just sitting there in some chairs, like, hey, maybe it's because you're laying supine, or maybe the acidity of your stomach is just slightly different at night, that it doesn't really matter as much in the evening. And so our data for several years were just showing that protein, whether it was casein or whey, had a small advantage for things like perhaps body weight or fat loss over 4 or 6 weeks in people who were already obese. So they had some wiggle room to go. Metabolic rate seemed to be slightly better if you ate anything, carbohydrate, whey, or casein, instead of a placebo. So eating anything seemed to upregulate your resting metabolic rate through the night and into the next morning. We started thinking about the plant-based proteins kind of around the time that this Game Changers Netflix thing came out, and we had access to a combination protein of rice and pea. And so we wanted to make sure we had it as best we could lined up with its amino acid profile to compare against whey protein isolate, as well as some other things we were looking at. That study where we started using plant-based proteins was in middle-aged men. So like, we all could do it, guys. We'd get in here and we would do some, it was 150 eccentric only exercise, leg extensions and flexions. So it was a protocol that was published, but unfortunately we ended up having 2 participants in the hospital with rhabdo. That didn't turn out well. So the study got canceled, and we had—
Mike, were these trained individuals or untrained or moderately trained?
Yeah, they were trained, and these 2 individuals were probably the most trained of everybody that we had. They were highly fit. I mean, ultra runners, we're talking military people. It was surprising, to say the least. So
okay. It was 150 eccentric reps again? It was 100.
Yeah, 150 eccentric reps with each leg. And in our piloting of it, people were sore, but it wasn't a problem. And so we were very surprised. And so we did the right thing. We had to stop the protocol, and we shut it down. But we had 6 people roughly per group at the end of that. So we wish we had more like 8 or 9, but we were still powered appropriately for some of our outcomes. And in that study, nobody recovered well. So maybe the age was something that was going on. Nobody came back to normal in a time frame you might see for for like creatine kinase or enzymes you might see spilling out because of muscle damage. And the groups that recovered, everyone recovered close to baseline, but nobody made it there. And it did not matter if you had the plant-based protein or the whey protein isolate or the casein in this particular study. And we controlled everything. We did dietary, was fed to them for 5 days straight. We did 72 hours follow-up on these blood and performance markers, and we just didn't see anything after that period of time.
Could that be related to total protein intake over the course of the day versus, just giving them that one feeding pre-sleep? I mean, because they've already been feeding all day. I guess unless they were hypocaloric, would it have mattered more? And I mentioned the hypocaloric part because Tony works with fighters who there are times in their training where they have to just eat a lot less and recovery becomes an issue.
Yeah, we've thought about all that stuff in the design. Like, do we do hypocaloric? Do we do normal? Do we change protein to keep it low on purpose? But that's not how they were normally eating. So yes, absolutely, that could be related to the total protein intake over the day. And that's probably the biggest knock on pre-sleep feeding is, couldn't you just eat that some other time of day and it'd be fine? I know you've done one of these studies, Joey. There's a lot of data now, and actually the last 3 or 4 papers I've published have shown no difference if you have it at a different time of day. So what I've shifted my mindset for this and my recommendation, I guess it used to be more fully like, do it. And now it's like, get your total protein intake for the day. And if that nighttime feeding gives you a little opportunity to get to your number that you're looking for, it's a great opportunity. So you just don't have to worry about it, and it won't make you fat. We've done so much work now. We started putting microdialysis probes, excuse me, into their belly fat. And when we did that, we could then measure overnight lipolysis. Excuse me, choking.
I get a drink. Yeah, because one of your papers, you were looking at lipolysis, which, as you know, a lot of people who are outside of science or even within science will misconstrue that as loss of fat mass.
Right.
So tell us about that work you did.
Yeah. So again, we always have to clarify lipolysis versus oxidation and ultimately a change in body composition. So basically, we were being criticized because we didn't know what was going on while they were sleeping. And we started measuring things when they came back in the morning. And so we said, it was a skill that I had from grad school. We put these microdialysis probes, which is a teeny little semi-permeable membrane we were putting it into the belly fat. You can also put it in muscle, which is cool. But we were putting it in belly fat. You perfuse a saline solution through the probe. And what you get out of the probe is that same saline solution plus whatever's coming out of your cells. So that gets into the interstitial space. And we measure glycerol as an indicator of lipolysis because glycerol can't be taken back up by the adipose cell without the proper enzymes there. So we don't do free fatty acids, we do glycerol as the indicator of lipolysis. And what we thought was, okay, if it's going to be a problem, we would probably see some change in the glycerol that's coming out all night long. So 8 hours of collection. And we see no difference. We've done that in obese men, obese women. We've done in fit women and fit men. And we just do not see any change in lipolysis. Now that's acute again, just like MPS. But the longer term studies we've done have shown actually a benefit to fat, the direction of fat change, not a statistically significant deal, but the direction of fat change would be one we would all choose by consuming this protein before bed.